And we are live. I am John Pollock, joined by Wai Ting. It is Friday, January the 14th, almost halfway through January. Year's almost over.
Oh, pretty much. You know, once you're past the 15-day mark in the year, I mean, the rest is just piece of cake. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you feeling going into the weekend, Wai?
I feel fine.
You've been outside today?
I have. Yeah, I did some grocery shopping this morning, actually. Yeah.
Dude, it's cold. It's cold in this city.
It's freezing. Yeah, no, for sure. But that's not unusual. I mean, it is January.
It's still cold. It's still really cold outside.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. But
breaking news: cold in Canada.
That's Canada is cold. Canada is cold. Yes.
Well, let's go into some news items, if we shall, and we're going to start off with news coming out of Pro Wrestling Noah. So they've got their card in Sendai happening on Sunday, and early Friday they announced that 10 performers are off of that show, including Kaito Kiyomiya, Yoshinari Ogawa, Junta Miyawaki, Yoshiki Inamura, Kinya Okada, Yasutaka Yano, Super Crazy, Tadasuke, Daiki Inaba, and Masato Tanaka. They had stated that all are off due to either a combination of positive COVID tests or being in close contact, with the exception of Masato Tanaka, who they just stated was due to poor physical condition, but did not state anything further. So this card has just been ravaged on Sunday. They do have their main event intact, which is Masa Kitamiya challenging Katsuhiko Nakajima for the GHC Heavyweight Championship. But this is this was a very significant loss to this card, with 10 people removed from Sunday's show.
10 is a lot at one time, absolutely. But you know, in a close quarters contact performance art like professional wrestling, I'm kind of surprised we don't hear about these cases more often in such mass numbers. I think what is notable though in this situation is just how transparent the company is, issuing public statement, having Kaito Kiyomiya actually come out and actually deliver the message to the audience themselves, specifically naming who is involved, who might be suffering from actual positive tests, and who might also just be precautions. It seems to be at least a bit more of a philosophical difference between how certain promotions might handle it here.
Yeah, it's actually wild how much transparency you get from some versus not the others. I mean, even when you're just following like the sports leagues and all that what they're going through, and the NHL putting out, they're having games affected by this, and the Toronto Maple Leafs can't even have fans at games. I mean, you're getting constant updates from the league. You look at a company like WWE, they have not so much as put out a statement acknowledging the existence of anything going on. So I think it's just a varying degree that you see with Noah here. It's like they're being very upfront about this case and putting out names and stating reasons, outlining they're double vaccinated and what the protocols are, at least giving people like that kind of information.
Yeah, it just might speak, as much to a cultural difference in how we choose to handle COVID versus maybe how in Japan those tendencies may differ. But the WWE tends to leave it to the performers themselves if they wish to announce it. I mean, I suppose in the past, with the Renee Young test all the way back now, the word was that they weren't too happy about that, but now that certainly seems to be different, with Roman Reigns being very public. I mean, Drew McIntyre himself back then, he was very public with it as well. But, as far as like an on-screen announcement, I mean, they seem to let the talent take the lead before mentioning anything themselves.
Anyway, so that card is still going down on Sunday. It'll be late Saturday night, early Sunday on Wrestle Universe that card is airing. So that is the latest going on there. The Wrestling Observer newsletter put out its annual Hall of Fame issue on Friday, and there are 5 inductees into the Hall of Fame. Leading the way is Kazuchika Okada, who received 92% of the votes in his region, and that would correlate to 271 votes, one of the higher percentages, not the highest percentage, not at the Kenta Kobashi level of 2002, but 92%, including number 1 across all of the different categories of voters. That was followed by the Los Brazos Trios unit getting 86%, which was a massive leap from last year with 53% of the vote to go in. Jim Crockett Jr., who just passed away this year, he had an astonishing leap. He had 36% of the votes last year, 82% this year. Like, that is just a stunning jump that sometimes you do see the, you hate to use the term like death bump, but it is when somebody dies, there is so much written about that person that more is learned about such a candidate. But even that, taking into account, that's still a massive leap to 82%. And then Don Owen, who just squeaked by with 61% of the votes in his region. You do need 60% to qualify, which is interesting this year because Mystico, now wrestling as Caristico, had 59.7% of the votes. He was, I think, 2 votes shy. Actually, he was 1 vote shy of inclusion, and they do not round up. So that 0.3% actually does make a difference. They explain this in the issue that the Baseball Hall of Fame, that you do not round up, and therefore he was out by 1 vote. Although I would say, given all this support and Los Brazos now off the ballot next year, I would say Caristico's candidacy next year looks to be pretty strong that he will make it in, but nonetheless, he missed by a vote.
Okay, very, very peculiar. I mean, very cool actually to know about some of those stats and how how much the Observer Hall of Fame counts every single vote. So every vote really does matter.
Every vote counts. It was interesting to see some of the jumps here. First of all, Wai, let me ask you this question. I know you're not a voter. I am a voter, and I did vote for Okada. What would be your argument not to vote for Okada if you were receiving a ballot? Would you have one?
Oh God. I mean, I can't honestly think about one, I mean, I suppose if you do have some sort of criticism, it's the fact that he's so young and that perhaps it's too early. But when you just simply look at the amount of accomplishments, the amount of time that he's been on top and carrying the company in the terms
a decade.
A decade, yeah. And I know for the Observer Hall of Fame, somebody's in-ring ability is a big factor in how how good of a candidate they are. And certainly Kazuchika Okada has been not only on top, but at the top of many people's best wrestler in the world list for many years. So I can't see much of an argument.
Yeah, it's always just interesting to see those. Like, even as we said, Kenta Kobashi did not get 100%, though he was like 98. It's about as close as you're going to get. But some other interesting candidates here. Kota Ibushi had a big jump from 38% to 54%. And this was a year where, I mean, this was not a Hall of Fame year, this 2020 for Ibushi. He was just sidelined by so many different factors, but still got a big jump. I would say he's probably on the cusp of inclusion. Johnny Rougeau is someone I've been voting for several years now. He got a big jump from 25 to 47%. I don't think he's going to get in, but it was interesting to see just how much more support he got this year. Someone who lost support this year was Edge. He went from 44% last year to 32% this year. So this comeback has not really, at least this past year, has not strengthened his case. And he's an interesting one that you can compare with CM Punk, who CM Punk was another one I voted for. He did go from 15 to 33%, but still like way off for inclusion. And I think with Punk, it is like, if you were someone that were not convinced before this year he was a Hall of Famer, I guess like the AEW work was not going to be enough to push you over the edge to, pardon the pun, to include CM Punk, and are still waiting to see what his overall effect is going to be on AEW. But I think he has cleared the threshold for me, but I guess for the vast majority of people, he has not.
I suppose so. Yeah. I mean, I think a 7-year absence probably, might have something to do with it, but also the fact that I think he still has a bit to accomplish. So maybe we'll see in the next coming years.
And so dropped from the ballot for next year. This means you did not get 10% of the vote. So you're off next year. The original Hollywood Blondes of Buddy Roberts and Jerry Brown, Buddy Colt, the Fabulous Ones, Steve Kern and Stan Lane, Nikki Bella, Charlotte Flair, Kamala, Rick Martel, John Moxley, Seth Rollins, The Ultimate Warrior, Kyoko Inoue, Katsuyori Shibata, Takeshi Sugiura, Psycho Clown, John Da Silva, Roger Delaporte, and Andre Bolette, Takaki Kadani, and Stephanie McMahon. So this does not mean they cannot be put on the ballot later. Roman Reigns fell off the ballot for not having 10%, but he's going on back next year. He'll be back on the ballot, and they're also going to experiment next year with putting more tag team combinations on, because Akira Taue is someone that's sort of been like a decisive or a derisive pick, rather, for people that have either, somewhat, he's definitely a contentious candidate on the ballot. So next year he's going to be on the ballot as part of his team with Toshiaki Kawada, which I think has a much better chance of ensuring him into the Hall of Fame. They're also going to put Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood on the ballot. Argentina Rock and Miguel Perez are back on. The Briscoe brothers, Jack and Jerry, not Jay and Mark, Roman Reigns, Becky Lynch, Roy Welch, Shingo Takagi, and a very interesting candidate in Rossi Ogawa, who, has been a staple of Joshi Pro Res for decades now. And with the rise of Stardom, I guess it's time to really kind of put him under the microscope and look at Rossi Ogawa's career. Do you see big support next year for a Roman Reigns? Because he got none last year.
Next year, I guess it's dependent on how much what the competition is for him next year. I mean, I'm not a voter. I'm not somebody who's really interested in voting. But if you ask the criteria, I mean, what are the arguments against Roman Reigns? The fact that he hasn't maybe had the in-ring quality that's to be expected, or is it the fact that he hasn't had enough years on top?
I would say a lot of it. I think sometimes, I think WWE is both a blessing and a curse for candidates. It's like for AJ Styles and Sting, for years, they did not get support. Like AJ was knocked off the ballot one year. He didn't have 10%. And then he went to New Japan. That helped his case. But then both get to WWE and they're voted in. Like WWE does give you the wide visibility. And I think that helps for candidates that have had Hall of Fame level careers, but have not had the platform of the awareness level for some. That's just my own theory. At the same time, I think if you are brought up in the WWE system, I think it's a lot harder to crack through. And I would say that's what Roman Reigns maybe suffers from. Although to me, it's like, I think he has a very strong case, and I think he will end up in, but it's probably going to take several years where he has kind of, I think, certainly ascended several levels over these past 18 months or so into this new character. And especially you don't assign as much drawing power, I think, to WWE when so much of their revenue is guaranteed. And this theory, you can put anyone in that slot. I would say Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar are proving at the moment it's not just pick anybody from the roster that you can put into these spots. Like there is a specialty that certain performers do bring, even to a gigantic monster that is a WWE machine. So there you go. You can check out the Hall of Fame issue that is out. Wai, the drama has ended. Hiroshi Tanahashi has re-signed with New Japan Pro Wrestling, announcing that he has signed his player agreement. He's safe, Wai. 45-year-old Hiroshi Tanahashi is not going anywhere. He is New Japan.
They got him. Gave him a nice, sweet deal. So, yeah, obviously, maybe one of the most obvious re-signings that there could be. This is the franchise player of the company, and in Japan, a place where people don't often jump if they're homebred guys. Really not much of a surprise, but I don't know, maybe a bit of a good sense of PR at a time when I think New Japan can really use it. So sure, why not?
How do you see Hiroshi Tanahashi being used over the next year? Can you see him being, hot-shotted into a big title program for like a one-off show? Is he still going to be valued at that level? Or do you sort of see him being phased down into a lot of these multi-man tags, or being someone that when borders are more open, like sending him to the US with the title?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he is the United States champion at present. So I imagine much of that is for the reason of him being able to come over and having some sort of, not just to help New Japan strong, but to maybe promote New Japan through its current associations with Impact Wrestling. He would be a name that I'm sure AEW would be more than happy to bring in whenever, if the ability is possible. Maybe even some other independent dates that are out there. I mean, but it's also a time where New Japan really needs him right now. So for all of these reasons, he is, I think, as valuable now as he's probably been in a long, long time.
So you don't see him like getting his dad jacket and being put into like the 6-mans on the undercard yet?
Absolutely not. No, not at a time when I think, there's still a bit of a shortage in terms of foreign talent, and the man is still an incredible performer.
Yeah, it's an interesting question that if under normal circumstances where we were looking at such a bloated New Japan roster, when you had all these numbers involved, where a Yuji Nagata, Satoshi Kojima, Hiroshi Tenzan would figure in, like would they have got the Manabu Nakanishi send off and transitioned out just because of the numbers? I don't think they're in that position now where they're necessarily waving goodbye to any of these people if they are so willing to continue. And I would say the same with like Tanahashi. Like I fully expect him probably to see this guy in like 2 or 3 more G1s. I don't think that's completely out of the question to expect.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, there's still so many dream matches attached to his name that I would love to see from people that might be coming into New Japan Pro Wrestling. And again, the possibility on this side of the world is there's still so much of it for him.
Tonight, we've got Friday Night SmackDown from Omaha, Nebraska, where we have 0 matches announced as of now, but they are continuing the build to the Royal Rumble. And then Rampage will be the taped show from Raleigh, North Carolina. Sean Spears taking on Andrew Everett, Adam Cole versus Trent Beretta, Nyla Rose, the Bunny, and Penelope Ford against Chris Statlander, Red Velvet, and Layla Hirsch. And the main event, the AEW Tag Team Championship, with Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus making their first defense against John Silver and Alex Reynolds. And we will be live right after Rampage at 11:15 Eastern for all members of the Post Wrestling Cafe to go through SmackDown, whatever happens over the course of those 2 hours, and Rampage, where we know everything that will happen over the course of those 60 minutes.
Yeah, from what I hear from people who attended the tapings, this tag team title match between the Jurassic Express and Silver and Reynolds was really good and perhaps even better than anything that we saw on Dynamite that day. So I'm looking forward to that one a whole lot. Trent Beretta versus Adam Cole as a singles match, I think, is very interesting as well. And of course, in the 6-women tag, we've got whatever Statlander and Layla Hirsch are trying to build off of from their little interaction on Dynamite, as well as whatever they've been building on Dark. So we look towards maybe some storyline development there.
Yeah, and we wanted to just take a second just to talk about some of the shows coming up this weekend. Game Changer is doing shows in Detroit tonight, featuring Kevin Nash's long-awaited GCW debut. And then Saturday night, they're in Hoffman Estates, Illinois. So these are the last shows before next weekend. Their big weekend where they're doing the Hall of Fame ceremony on Saturday and, of course, the Hammerstein Ballroom show on Sunday night. But, yes, Kevin Nash in a GCW ring, Way.
Yeah, why not? Like, it's part of the fun of GCW. Everybody belongs. You can be Jeff Jarrett or you can be Kevin Nash, and it's just like it's the combination and the weirdness of independent wrestling that I think gets people excited. So I'm really curious to see who he mixes in with. Maybe he'll be there with the pot smoking dude, or I don't know. Can he do something? Can he do some sort of death match? Will he be taking a light tube? Who knows?
Just put him on commentary. Just let us relive that final Thunder while he was Booker in '99, and that could be our night of commentary with Kevin Nash.
Why not? Sure.
But one of the more interesting shows, I would say, is the debut of Terminus that is starting on Sunday in Atlanta. It's going to be streaming on Fight TV with Dave Prazak and Lenny Leonard calling the show. Some of the matches include Jonathan Gresham and Josh Alexander in a pure rules match for the ROH title, Jay Lethal against Lee Moriarty, Moose versus Mike Bennett, Fred Yehai and Tracy Williams against Dante Caballero and Joe Keys, Bandito versus Baron Black. Black is one of the co-founders, along with Gresham, of the promotion, and Jordan Grace versus Kiera Hogan, Daniel Garcia, Adam Priest, JDX and Invictus Cash, and Liza Hall versus Janai Kai, consisting of that show. But what's interesting, Way, is they put out earlier this week the Terminus directives, like the unique rule set that will be enforced. All matches can be won by pin, submission, KO, or disqualification. There are time limits that they say will be strictly enforced. Singles matches, 15 minutes. Tag multi-man, 15 minutes. Championship bouts, 20 minutes. I love it. That is a sales feature there in and of itself for me.
Absolutely.
We are not giving you your 40-minute drama. Okay.
Yeah.
20 minutes. Okay. This is my old high school economics teacher who told us, folks, your essay, 750 words. That's your max, because you're going to write 2,000 words and over 1,000 of it is garbage. So you got to edit it down to a tight 750. And I said, that is a great life lesson right there.
Quality over quantity, I think, is always a good philosophy to live by. But judging by the talent here, I don't think there'll be much long feeling out process, especially if it's a championship bout at a 20-minute limit. I mean, some might be disappointed that they're not going to get at least a 30 for some of those matches, but I feel like you'll be very satisfied with the 20 minutes that you're going to see.
So there's also an overtime period if they reach the time limit. A 90-second overtime period occurs if there is no winner. After the time limit expires, grapplers will start the overtime period in a neutral position. If there is no decision when overtime expires, the match is a draw. So it's really a 21-minute and 30-second time limit. That's the longest we can go here.
I find the overtime one of the most interesting aspects of this Terminus directive, and the fact that they've decided to choose 90 seconds, a minute and a half, which in professional wrestling isn't a whole lot. I mean, in jiu-jitsu, they sometimes do sudden death. And I feel like it's kind of being patterned after that, where in a sudden death round, you're giving up position from, let's say, you give the guy your back or something. And that, and then 90 seconds with somebody on your back, I mean, that is forever. But here in a neutral position, I'm curious to know what they mean by that. Are we simply talking about two people standing? Are we talking about, something a bit more kind of technical that we don't know yet? And because it's professional wrestling, I mean, we know that they're choosing 90 seconds for a reason, and I can expect those 90 seconds to be action packed, as if you're constantly going for submissions or going for pins or going for knockouts, and maybe those particular 90 seconds you're going to see something incredibly special. But to me, all of this tells me that these are people who think a whole lot about in-ring presentation, and they're very creative within boundaries. I think there's always going to be more craving for, I mean, this is taking that pure rules, to the next level. There's always a craving, I think, for people wanting more serious sports-like presentation, and this seems to be them taking that really to its full extent.
Yep. Their disqualification criteria. So if there's outside interference, there's a DQ. For an object, you're DQ'd. Or if you get two technical fouls, and technical fouls consist of throwing your opponent over the top rope. So you have to do that twice. A 10-second top rope count, 5-count rope break or corner break, intentional physical contact with the referee, an intentional low blow, an intentional eye gouge, leaving a lot to interpretation. The referee has to determine what is intentional. Fish hooking. No, you can fish hook twice. Intentional hair pulling, spitting, closed fist punches to the face, and technical fouls given at referee's discretion, and countouts only a count of 5 seconds on the floor, which is really interesting because I personally think that the longer count makes for more drama. But it sounds like they do not want to go in that direction. Like they want less on the floor and not doing count out teases. Because I don't think you're going to build up much drama for someone breaking a 5 count.
No, I mean, the idea seems to be we don't want fighting on the floor at all.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to bet, I mean, other than a knockout or something, you might not see some sort of bullshit. Hey, this person was distracted for a long time, or they fell asleep and forgot the match was going on. I don't think you're going to see any of those. And this is probably more so a rule to tell us that, hey, all the action is going to be kept in the ring. Closed fists are illegal here, which falls in line with UWFI rules, and I believe does Bloodsport have no non-closed fists? I forget, but that always is curious to me too. We're just talking about open palm strikes, which is I guess easy enough to adapt to, but for most wrestlers, with closed punches being such a common part of many people's move sets, yeah, we'll see how wrestlers adapt to that.
I'm intrigued by this show.
Can somebody get DQ'd by spitting? Can you see that, John, happening?
Isn't that listed there?
No, yeah, I'm saying, can you see them actually work a finish where somebody spits? somebody is goaded into spitting.
Yeah, that would be I like really spitting can only be intentional. I don't think there's much discretion there for the referee to really decipher in the moment. But yeah, I think like clearly a lot of thought has gone into this. I always appreciate that when you get something like this that is just laid out there in front of you, where the concept is as much part of the intrigue as the matches you're presenting, and it's on a weekend where it's relatively quiet. And I don't see this being like a gigantic show on Sunday that people are going to be tuning into in massive numbers. But nonetheless, I think it's a really unique concept. It's got some big names on the show, and more so just seeing this in practice. I would really like to see how it all turns out. So that's an interesting show this weekend.
I have to give them a lot of credit for, I think, the promotion of this event. I have to say for a promotion's first show, the fact that we have talked about it a number of times on a relatively mainstream, I would say, news coverage based source like ours, I think says a lot about the amount of interest that's there and the great job that they've done with their video packages and also graphics packages as well.
All right. So that is happening. I also want to make mention that the UFC is kicking off their first show of the year on Saturday, which this is a card that I think it's down now to about 10 fights on this show, but really it's featuring like the main event is a really quality featherweight fight. Giga Chikadze is fighting Calvin Kattar, and Chikadze has won. He has won his last 7 fights in the US since coming to the UFC. So he's a real surging featherweight contender. And if he wins this fight, he'll probably be in good shape, probably not to get the very next title fight because Alexander Volkanovski and Chan Sung Jung are fighting in April, but he is certainly a featherweight to watch. And this should be Calvin Kattar is an excellent fighter. So I think that's going to be an interesting fight to watch on Saturday. They've got their pay-per-view next weekend. And in today's news update, I'm actually going to go through all the UFC weight classes and all the interesting stories that we have in each weight class as the UFC kicks off its year. And Eric Marcotte will have a report on that on Saturday on the site. We'll have GCW reports from John Pine, and John Cena will be covering the Terminus event on Sunday. So lots of coverage on the site. And as we mentioned, Wai and I will be back tonight with Rewind to SmackDown, and we have plenty of shows on the site as well, Wai.
That is correct. Yeah, we've got, of course, right now our MMA prediction show with you and Errol Hawani talking about everything from the past year and what Errol Hawani may have gotten right or may have gotten wrong. And then we also have the British Wrestling Experience, who just dropped the show yesterday as well. So check that out. And then, of course, we also have our Worst of 2021 show with you, me, Braden, and Davey talking about the very, very worst of the last year. So I've completely just drained that out of my brain for now. I can move on. But if you need that cleansing as well, I encourage you guys to watch that show either on the YouTube or listening on your post-wrestling feed. We have one super chat from a good friend of the show, Daniel Shahori, who sends in $10. Thank you so much, as always, for your support, Daniel, of our shows. He says, Happy Friday. Is there a specific weekly Japanese wrestling TV program that you would recommend to somebody new to Japanese wrestling? P.S. Will you be reviewing Peacemaker?
Weekly program. It's actually interesting. New Japan World tonight is actually launching this new series. It's like a behind the scenes kind of documentary feature of the New Japan dojo in New Zealand that Bad Luck Fale runs. I wouldn't say that would be like your jumping on point, but All Japan did a very similar series a year or two ago. And I found it to be fascinating, of just cameras following the dojo's students. And I'm kind of interested to see like New Japan's kind of presentation of that. I would recommend, like, if you're new to some of these promotions, I would gravitate towards the ones that do offer English commentary. And I think that like they largely do a very good job of explaining a lot of the backstories and characters, and you'll fall into it fairly quickly. So that would be my recommendation. And Peacemaker, yes, just dropped this week, right?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, on HBO Max, Crave if you're in Canada. And of course, this is John Cena's spin-off from the Suicide Squad, written and directed by James Gunn. They've released the first 3 episodes so far. I've watched 2 of them, and I can tell you that it is every bit, I think, if you saw James Gunn's Suicide Squad, I think you would really like this one. It's a very similar type of humor. It's much more mature than, Guardians of the Galaxy, which James Gunn is probably most known for. It is much more mature than you have probably ever seen John Cena, other than in the Suicide Squad.
Oh, wow.
This is riddled with profanity and violence, and it is very entertaining. At points I do think it is trying to be a little too edgy for its own good, like maybe one too many F-bombs for me. But I understand what they're going for. It's a more mature audience, and there's the novelty for a wrestling fan of seeing, the perennial PG performer in John Cena nude at times, and engaged in much more of violent and profane material than usual. So it's very entertaining. It has me hooked. I can't say I love it, but I have to say, I put out a tweet asking for people's reactions, and it seems pretty unanimous that people really love this thing, or at least are really enjoying the first 3 episodes. So I'm going to be continuing with it, and I look forward to hearing more thoughts. We're not going to be doing a specific podcast related to it as well, but that doesn't mean, other people in the post-wrestling community may not. So maybe look out for that if that's happening. I do also want to mention, maybe just piggybacking off of Daniel's suggestion, is one thing I forgot to mention is that tomorrow morning we have the latest edition of the Long and Winding Royal Road showing up here in the Post Wrestling Cafe, and WH Park will be joined by Martin Bushby to talk about a classic 5-star match from Pro Wrestling Noah in 2003. They're actually breaking format, John. It's neither All Japan nor the 90s. They're going to Noah in 2003, but that is a matchup between Mitsuharu Misawa and Kenta Kobashi from March the 1st of 2003. So that is readily available on YouTube if you just quickly search for that, but then listen to the podcast tomorrow. One more plug, and that is for our latest edition of Postmarks that comes out in the Post Wrestling Cafe feed this week. It'll be Bruce Lord and David Myers talking to fan favorite here over in the Post Wrestling Cafe, MJ from NJ, talking all about his interest in professional wrestling, how he got into it, how he found our podcast, his shoot job, a little bit about that perhaps. So that'll be available for free on the Post Wrestling Cafe feed. If you are a patron, you get that automatically in your RSS. If you're not, just go to patreon.com/post wrestling sometime afternoon Eastern time.
All right. So look out for all of those shows this weekend. Rewind to SmackDown, the long and winding Royal Road that ventures off the path into Noah land. And then Sunday night, Brandon Thurston and Chris Gullo will have WrestleNomics Radio coming at you. That is it for us. Thank you for tuning in to the Post Daily News Update.